next speaker. So Ravi Selvaganapathy is a distinguished engineering professor of mechanical and biomedical engineering at McMaster University and the Canada Research Chair Laureate in Biomicrofluidics. His research interests are in microfluidic devices for environmental and medical diagnostics, drug discovery, and artificial organs. He has more than 20 years of extensive experience in micromanufacturing, microfluidics, and materials development, which has resulted in over 150 journal publications, 70 conference publications, 35 invited talks, and 8 patents. In recent years, he has developed several biofabrication methods for cultivated meat production. So really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about lab-grown meat from Dr. Ravi Selvaganapathy. Passing the digital mic over to you.
Thanks, Renee Claude, for that introduction. All right, so excited to be here presenting on this topic. This is of recent interest in my group. We've been working on this for the past 5 or 6 years or so. Before I start, I'll start with this slide, which is a conflict of interest and a disclaimer slide. I conduct research in this field. My student and I co-founded a startup company in this field. But the views that I present here are solely as my role as an academic and a professor at McMaster University and are not related to the company. All right, I'll start with this slide. So this is from data from Food and Agricultural Organization, and it shows the distribution of per capita consumption of meat more or less 50 or so years ago in 63. So it shows that North America and Western Europe are significant consumers of meat, while the rest of the world wasn't consuming as much. If we move forward about 50 years, what you see is more of red, and therefore the meat consumption has grown significantly over that period of time. If you dig into the data, what you see is that countries such as the United States started off at a high point and then went even higher. But then developing economies such as Brazil and China started off low and then are significantly increasing. So as an economy gains more disposable income, what you see is meat consumption automatically go or increase with respect to that. One thing to note is the line on the bottom, that's India. It has so far not taken off as China did in the 1980s. But you would expect that with growing income levels, the meat consumption in India as well as in several parts of Africa will also go like that. So what we see is that over the past 50 years, and then likely in the next 50 years, you're going to see dramatic increase in meat consumption. And that has to be sustained through agriculture. But if we look at global land use, out of the habitable land that we have, 50% of it goes towards agriculture. And of that 50%, we see an incredible 77% devoted to livestock, right? So this is land associated with grazing, land associated with plant food production that goes into feeding animals and so on. And therefore, we don't have much capacity to expand beyond what we have right now. And the only way that we can expand is by taking the other 37% of habitable land, which is in forest, and then converting it into farming. And that is what essentially is happening right now. So this is basically Amazon being cleared for soybean cultivation so that it can be fed to produce pork. And this is unsustainable, especially given that we are likely to face an increasing demand for meat as the world becomes more wealthier and there's more income available. So we have to look at other ways of sustaining this demand. In addition to that, there are also other stressors. So in cultivating animals, especially animals which live over and develop over a longer duration of time, like cattle, we consume more water as compared to plants. Animals and animal husbandry is also a significant source of greenhouse gas emission, and larger the animal, more greenhouse gas emissions come out of that. Therefore, there is a possibility that if we can circumvent all of this, if we can lower the water use, lower the greenhouse gas emission, and in particular, lower the amount of land use in cultivating meat, then that is a much more sustainable and a complementary way to farm-grown meat production right now. And so one such solution is cultivating meat in an industrial setting or in a petri dish. So what this can lead to, the advantages of this kind of a solution is that it can lead to intensive cultivation. So the amount of land that you require is going to be considerably lesser. You can cultivate things faster in this kind of a format. And there are also side benefits. So for example, countries such as Singapore, Japan, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and so on, which are land deficient or they don't have suitable land for cultivation, can potentially use this technology in order to become food secure. Simultaneously, if we can use energy derived not from fossil fuels but from renewable sources such as solar energy in performing these operations, then we can also reduce greenhouse gases associated with livestock production. And in addition, because this could potentially be a closed loop system, you can basically take water and recycle water and therefore have a minimal impact on the environment and not stress out water resources that are already quite stressed out. So these are all the potential advantages of cultivated meat, and that is what strives us in both academia as well as the number of companies that are out there. So if I look at sort of development of this technology over the past time frame, just give me a minute. What we see is that it all started with academic research. This is an early paper on cultivation of smooth muscle cells into fibers. And then this is another paper where we have cultivation of skeletal muscle cells into myofibers. These were all done on organisms such as guinea pigs and rats, primarily for biomedical research as models to mimic human muscle fibers and to look at diseased and biological conditions. But this technology got some people thinking, in particular William Van Allen, into looking at using this as a way to cultivate meat. And his idea was to grow meat without inflicting pain or sacrificing the animal itself. And he did a lot in the 80s and 90s in advocating this technology be adapted to the cultivated meat area. And in some circles, he's known as the godfather of cultivated meat. He also went on to patent some of these ideas. So this is one from his patent, industrial production of meat from in vitro cell cultures, which sort of explicitly details his vision of where this field could potentially go. The realization of that came about in 2000s, particularly in 2002. So this was, again, a NASA-funded research, and the idea was to look at food supply or meat supply in environments such as Mars or Moon, where access to that or transportation could be quite difficult. So this is from Benjaminson's work, where they cultivated some skeletal muscle cells from goldfish along with fibroblasts. This is two different kinds of cell types that are needed to form that meat, and co-cultured it along with some matrix that are plant derived. So this is a classic forerunner to all the technologies that we are seeing right now, where these elements of combining two different types of cells, as well as having a substrate derived from plants so that we can get a high degree of mass, has already been demonstrated and shown. And on the right, you see some figures of a piece of meat that have been derived in this particular fashion. So all this was good. And this led some other people who were in the tissue engineering space to think of scalability in the production of such cultivated meat. One such person was Vladimir Murnov, then at University of South Carolina, and he wrote a proposal to NASA to look into a scalable way of producing this. And his idea, as shown in the figure on the right, is to start with a biopsy of from animals to extract out cells that can be expanded or grown in large numbers, and then subsequently assemble them onto these substrates. He used collagen, for instance, and create these globules of meat-like tissues that can be then combined with traditional food processing technologies to form a minced meat type patty for a hamburger, for instance. Unfortunately, his proposal was rejected. However, this is one of the famous proposals that NASA did reject, because it was mentioned in this article by Wendy Wolfson in the New Scientist, and his ideas largely was propagated to the rest of the academic community. One such funding agency which did fund this research was Center Novem in Netherlands. And from 2005 onwards, they funded sort of three kinds of research thrusts in this space. One was in the stem cell biology area, trying to get some cells that could potentially be expanded and cultivated. The other was in tissue engineering, to try to form large structures that could look like meat. And then the third one was culture media, try to get lower cost media that can be used to grow these cells. The outcome of that kind of funding, along with some other private funding, was the demonstration of the first ever lab-grown burger by Mark Post, who subsequently took on some of these projects in 2012, 2013 timeframe or so. So that was the first sort of demonstration that this could be done in a reasonably scalable fashion, that we could at least produce one hamburger or meat worth of one hamburger in a lab type setting as compared to a field type setting. And that spurred a lot of action, because meat is a very large global industry. That led to a significant amount of venture capital funding, and new startups came about. And so this chart here from Good Food Institute shows the expansion of number of companies that were growing. So in 2015, Mosa Meat was the company that Mark Post started. And then there were a few other companies like Memphis Meat and Just Foods. These companies are still around. But then every year from then on, the number of companies starting out in this space expanded and grew significantly. On the right, you see the graph of the amount of funding that went into this nascent industry that also grew exponentially. And now what you're seeing is newer companies that are formed that specialize in certain areas where there are challenges. So for example, in terms of creating new cell lines, in terms of creating media that are low cost but expand quite well, as well as in creating scaffolds to form these three-dimensional structures. So the industry, in some senses, has settled into what this is called as this generic cultured meat workflow. And the idea is we start with the animal of interest. It could be a cow, a chicken, or duck, and other animals. And then a biopsy is taken. And from these biopsies, specific types of cells that are used for expansion are isolated. These could be muscle cells that can be expanded into different myocytes. It could be other cells like adipocytes or fat cells that could be used to create fat cells or to differentiate into other types of cells. And then you have a phase where these cells that have been extracted are enlarged millions or billions of times, so that you have a large population of cells to start out with, and then they are assembled into structured products where the tissue is replicated, or unstructured products more like minced meat, where they are combined with some binders, and using food extrusion technologies, they can be given a shape or a form. So having said that, there are a number of challenges that are still out there that spur both industry as well as academic researchers in this space. The primary of them is cost. The first burger that Mark Post made and demonstrated cost anywhere between $300,000 to $400,000 or so. That cost is considerably reduced. That now costs lesser than $1,000 a burger. However, they're still far more than what an average burger does cost. And therefore, reducing the cost in the various aspects of the production is an important element. And the other one is scaling production up into very large sizes. Academically, there are a number of challenges. So, for example, creating cell lines that can be divided indefinitely is an important element, and these do not exist for a number of animal species that are of interest. Another element is that serum-based media is used to grow these cells and expand these cells, and one would like to have reduced serum or no serum in those media. Growth factors that enable the cells to grow aggressively are also not available in a low-cost form. So these are all areas which are of importance in terms of meeting the cost requirements. There are bioreactors available. Typically, these are bioreactors that are used in the pharmaceutical industry, and because of this, they are quite expensive. And therefore, lowering the cost of these bioreactors as well as scaling them up so that you can have larger production is also important, and research needs to be taken up in this area. And finally, assembling these cells into a format where the taste and the texture of meat, of field-grown meat, is produced is also an important area. Research has started, and it's very nascent in this field, but still more effort is quite needed. And finally, assembled muscle-like tissues atrophy if they are not given external stimulation, and therefore providing some form of exercise like stretching them is likely important, and therefore bioreactors that can enable us to do this is also an important element of research in this space. So what we would like to see is more academic research, and this area historically has not been well funded because it doesn't fall into health, it doesn't fall into the traditional agricultural space, and therefore there has been a lack of funding. And so what we are trying to do is to promote the government and funding agencies to look into this area that has dramatically expanded in the past 10 years or so, but put more research infrastructure as well as funding so that academic research that benefits the entire community, both industry as well as the population, can be done. And there are a number of areas that are not tackled by the industry that academia can help. For instance, maintaining biodiversity of cellular sources, creating cell lines that are easy to access and openly accessible, looking at a close look at environmental impact of the technologies that are being developed, and as well as looking at biological effects of how these new growth media that we are trying to use affects the cells and the things that they produce, as well as the formats that we cultivate these meats, how do they affect the output of the cells that we are growing, are all important for the society. And this is something that the academia can do quite well. We can also partner with governmental agencies into coming up with new quality standards for cultivated meat, which do not exist at this time. And therefore, so my role has been to sort of promote this in Canada. And I'm sort of advocating for academic research and more input into such research which are long-term, which benefits society as well as the growing industry in Canada. Thank you very much.